She was beaten every day for being too sick to work, until a lonely cowboy took her home, and the wind howled outside the saloon, rattling the warped wooden walls like a ghost, desperate to come in. Inside, the stink of whiskey, sweat, and cigar smoke clung to every beam. Laughter rang out above the piano's clunky tune, glasses clinked, and boots stomped along warped floorboards. It was another bitter night in Dead Rock, Montana. In the back corner of the Dust Lantern brothel, a man slammed his fist on the table. "Where the hell is she?" he barked, rising unsteadily. "I paid for her an hour ago." A woman in a torn red corset approached, face taut with forced charm. "She'll be right out, sugar. She's late again," he snapped. Always some excuse with that one. Sick, tired, dizzy. Hell, might as well call the preacher. Behind the stained velvet curtain, Clara stood, one hand pressed to her chest, trying to control her breathing. She had coughed blood into a rag not 5 minutes ago. Her fingers still trembled from it. Her shift clung to her skin, damp with sweat despite the cold that seeped through the floorboards. Her stomach turned. "You go out there, or I'll drag you by the hair," barked Miss Geneva, the madam of the Dust Lantern. Her voice was smoke and gravel, her eyes cold. "You think men pay to watch you cough? You're lucky I even let you stay." "I can't tonight," Clara whispered. "I need—" A slap cracked through the room like gunfire. Clara reeled, grabbing the edge of the vanity to keep from falling. Blood smeared across her palm from the rag she dropped. Geneva sneered. "Then maybe you ain't worth feeding anymore." Out in the main room, the shouting grew louder. The customer now threw a glass against the wall. Eli McRae, who had been nursing a bottle of rye near the hearth, watched in silence. He had been in Dead Rock less than a day, long enough to know the place stank of desperation. His black coat was dusted with snow, his dark hair slick with the melt of travel. His hat shadowed sharp cheekbones and eyes like a winter creek, still and deep. "Get out there," Geneva hissed at Clara, "or I'll drag you myself." Clara tried to stand but collapsed to her knees, a wheezing cough racking her thin frame. The room spun. Somewhere far off, she heard laughter, then boots, then another blow. The curtain was yanked back, and Geneva's voice snarled, "You lazy little—" And then Eli moved. No one had noticed him rise, not even Geneva, until he was already between them. His voice was low, calm, but sharp as a knife drawn slow. "You plan to kill her in front of everyone?" Geneva blinked. "Excuse me?" Eli glanced down at Clara, who lay half-conscious on the floor, her lips split, a trickle of blood at her temple. He looked back at Geneva. "I said," he repeated, "are you planning to kill her?" The brothel fell silent. Even the drunk at the bar paused, glass halfway to his lips. Geneva scoffed. "She ain't your business." "She is now." Without another word, Eli reached into his coat, pulled out a wad of bills and tossed them onto the counter. "That cover her?" Geneva stared at the money. "You're buying her?" "I'm taking her," he said. She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. A quiet promise of violence if she tried. He bent down and lifted Clara into his arms. She didn't fight. She couldn't. Her head lolled against his shoulder, warm breath soft against his neck. She smelled like soap and blood. The door creaked open. A gust of freezing wind cut through the brothel as Eli stepped out into the night, carrying her like she weighed nothing. The snow swallowed them quickly, the sound of hooves fading into the wind. Inside, no one spoke. No one followed. No one dared. The snow had thickened to a curtain by the time Eli reached the edge of town. Wind howled through the trees like wolves mourning the moon, tearing at his coat and stinging his cheeks. He pulled the blanket tighter around Clara, her small body wrapped in old horse wool, limp in his arms. He had laid her across the saddle, her head resting gently against his chest, one of her arms tucked beneath the blanket to keep warm. She stirred only once as he mounted and clicked the mare into motion. "Don't take me back," she murmured, voice raw and trembling. "Please, not back." "You're not going back," he said, not sure if she heard. The mare trudged through the snow-covered trail, hooves crunching ice beneath layers of powder. The road up the ridge was narrow, twisting between pines heavy with frost. Eli kept one hand steady on the reins, the other braced around the woman whose life now rested in his care. She was feather light, too light, like someone who had gone too long without warmth or kindness. He'd seen too many like her. In another life, during the war, he had carried bodies like this, men who never came home, boys younger than her with blood in their boots and names already forgotten. He had ridden through battlefields under flags he no longer saluted, followed orders that stained his hands red. When it was over, he'd wandered west, swearing never to lift another weapon unless forced, never to bury another life. Now here he was, holding a stranger who might not survive the night. As they climbed higher into the hills, the forest thickened. Snow blanketed everything, branches, rocks, even the silence. It made the world seem hollow and sacred all at once. Just before nightfall, they reached the edge of a clearing. Nestled within it stood a small log cabin, smoke curling weakly from the chimney. The roof sagged a little on one side, but it stood strong against the wind. He dismounted carefully, then lifted Clara from the saddle, cradling her against his chest as he trudged through the knee-deep snow. Her breath was faint but steady, her head rolling slightly as he shifted her weight. Inside, the cabin was dim and cold, the hearth long since cooled. Eli laid her gently on the cot by the window, then moved quickly, building the fire back to life with dry kindling and pine shavings. The flames caught fast, licking upward like hungry fingers, casting the room in warm, flickering gold. He didn't undress her fully, just removed her boots and the snow-drenched shawl. Then he wrapped her in blankets, added another log to the fire, and stepped into the kitchen corner. From a small tin box, he pulled a bundle of dried herbs, collected from the meadow near the creek the previous spring. His mother used to swear by them for coughs and chills. He brewed them into tea, letting the sharp scent of pine and sage fill the room. When it was ready, he knelt beside her and gently lifted her head. "Drink this," he murmured, holding the warm cup to her lips. She stirred, eyes fluttering open for a moment, dazed and glazed with fever, but she sipped. Just a little, then drifted back into sleep. He sat with her as the fire grew stronger, watched the color slowly return to her cheeks, the tight lines on her face ease ever so slightly. He listened to the wind outside batter the trees, and he thought about mercy, about redemption, about the kind of man he had become, and whether this night could change any of that. She didn't know his past, didn't know the weight of ghosts he carried or the promises he had broken. She only knew that when no one else reached for her, he did. And for tonight, that was enough. He rose, added more wood to the fire, and sat nearby. Not to guard her, not to control her, just to be close, just in case she needed someone when the morning came. Clara woke to the crackle of firewood and the smell of smoke and pine. Her eyes fluttered open, blinking against the soft flicker of orange light. The ceiling above her was low, wooden and unfamiliar. The walls were logs, tightly sealed, and everything smelled of forest and ash. Her body ached. She tried to sit up, then winced, a sharp pain lancing through her ribs. Her throat felt dry, her lips cracked. For a moment she panicked. Where was she? Had she been sold again? Taken somewhere worse? Her breath caught. "Easy," came a low voice. She turned sharply. A man sat across the room near the fire, back straight, hands busy carving something small from a block of wood. His black coat was slung over a chair, boots drying by the hearth. He didn't look at her, but his voice was calm, steady. "You're safe. You're in my home." She shifted on the cot, pulling the blanket up to her chin. He looked up then, just briefly. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, deep and unreadable. "You needed help. That's all." She swallowed. "What do you want?" "Nothing," he said. "Not your thanks, not your story, just rest. You can stay until you're strong enough to leave." His tone was quiet. No expectation, no threat. That scared her more than yelling might have. She had met men who demanded everything with smiles. This man offered nothing, and it made her feel uncertain. She lay back down, still watching him. Over the next few days they spoke little. The wind howled outside, sometimes shaking the windows. Snow fell in thick curtains that turned the world beyond the glass into a blur. Inside, the fire stayed lit. The room was warm. Eli didn't hover, but he was always there, splitting wood, fixing the stove pipe, boiling water. Each morning, Clara awoke to a bowl of soup on the bedside table, sometimes thick with potatoes, sometimes thin with broth and herbs, always warm. He folded the blankets she kicked off in her sleep. He never asked questions. He didn't touch her. On the third day, she sat up and watched him from the bed. He was outside chopping wood, sleeves rolled to his elbows, face tight with concentration. She noticed the way he moved, not with power but with precision, like a man who had learned to ration every ounce of effort, a man who had once needed to survive something. When he came back in, he nodded to her. "You're upright." She nodded back. "Still hurts." He shrugged. "Healing always does." Later, when she stood and shuffled across the cabin for the first time, she noticed something on the shelf above the hearth. "Your photograph?" Framed in carved pine, the picture showed a woman in a white dress, standing beside a younger version of the man she now lived with. The woman smiled, full of light. The man beside her did not, though there was something in his posture that spoke of peace. That same posture was gone now. Clara touched the frame gently. "She your wife?" she asked. Eli didn't look up from the pot he stirred. "She was." Silence. "I'm sorry." He gave a short nod, then said nothing more. That night, Clara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the firelight throwing soft shadows across the walls. She still didn't know why he'd saved her, or what kind of man he really was. But when the wind screamed against the windows and she curled tighter under the blankets, she realized something. For the first time in months, no one would hit her if she coughed. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for someone to come through a door with fists or cruel demands. There was only fire, and soup, and silence, and a man who asked for nothing, but still made sure she had everything she needed to breathe again. The days grew longer, but the cold still clung to the trees like an old sorrow. Clara's strength returned in small increments, first in the way she sat up straighter, then in the way she moved about the cabin without wincing. Her skin, once pale and drawn, now carried a touch of color. She even laughed once, quiet, unsure, like a sound she had forgotten how to make. Eli noticed. He said nothing, but he noticed. He began to show her the small workings of life on the ridge, how to stack the wood so it would dry faster, how to coax a reluctant fire with just the right mixture of pine and birch. He taught her to scatter feed for the chickens, to brush the mare before morning chill seeped into her bones. Most mornings, they drank coffee on the porch, bundled in wool as the valley below disappeared beneath a fog of frost. Clara cradled the chipped mug in both hands, letting the warmth sink into her fingers. "I never liked coffee before," she said one morning, lips curved faintly. Eli glanced at her, amused. "Still don't. You just like how it feels." She smirked. "Maybe." One afternoon, while mending a tear in her shawl, she spoke of the past. Her voice was steady, but her eyes did not meet his. "My husband's name was David. We were married just 2 winters. He worked the mines near Elkhorn. I told him it wasn't safe, but there weren't many choices." She paused. "They said it was a gas leak. Said he probably didn't feel a thing. I didn't believe that." Eli stayed silent. She continued, quieter now. "We had no savings, no family. A man I owed rent to said he knew a place I could earn money. I didn't understand what kind of place until the doors locked behind me." She rubbed her arms, though the fire burned steady. "I wanted to die for a long time. Then I got sick, and I thought maybe it was a mercy." Her voice faltered. Eli rose, walked to the kettle, and poured her another cup of coffee. He set it down beside her, then sat back in his chair. "I don't believe in mercies like that," he said. "Not the dying kind." She looked at him then, really looked. There was something in the way he watched her, guarded but not cold. A man who knew loss, who did not pity her, but understood her. From that day on, something shifted. Their silences grew comfortable. They shared stories over soup, laughed at the squirrel that kept stealing firewood from the pile, worked side by side without the weight of expectation. The house felt fuller now, still quiet, but no longer hollow. In the evenings, she read from old books left on the shelf, and he listened, half pretending to whittle but never once looking away. Sometimes their eyes lingered just a second too long. Sometimes their hands brushed when passing dishes. Nothing more, nothing spoken. Until the night of the storm. The wind shrieked down from the ridge like it was tearing at the sky itself. Snow slammed against the windows in wild fists. Eli had just added another log to the fire when he heard her cry out. He turned fast. Clara thrashed in her bed, face damp with sweat, hands gripping the blanket in a vice. "No," she whimpered. "Please don't lock me in." Eli crossed the room, knelt beside her and gently placed a hand on her wrist. "Clara," he said, soft but firm, "you're safe. You're here." She didn't wake, but her breathing slowed. Her hands loosened, still caught in the dream, but easing back. He hesitated, then took her hand fully in his. She was trembling. He stayed that way for a long time, his hand wrapped around hers, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of her breath. When she finally stilled, he remained by her side until the storm passed. And long after, news travels in strange ways across snow-covered land. In Dead Rock, whispers turned into shouts. Someone claimed to have seen Clara leaving town in the arms of a stranger. Another said a man paid for her and disappeared into the hills. Geneva, Madam of the Dust Lantern, seethed behind her painted face. She spat on the saloon floor and called it theft. "She was my property," she hissed, "and now someone owes me." Within a week, a reward was posted in the back of the general store. $50.00 for the safe return of a runaway girl. Pale, mid-20s, sickly, but valuable. Not a name, just a number. But that was enough. A man named Luther Cobb took the paper with a grunt and didn't ask questions. Once a bounty hunter, now a drifting hand with debts and a bad habit of solving things with rope and fists, he figured the mountains might offer a quick payday. He had tracked worse in deeper snow. He rode out before dawn, carrying nothing but his revolver, a coil of rope, and a memory of Clara's face from long ago, when she still smiled in Dead Rock, when her eyes hadn't yet turned hollow. He followed broken trails, talked to a trapper who mentioned a horse headed north last week during a storm, found hoof prints on a frozen creek bank, a discarded rag stiff with blood. Then he saw the smoke, just a thread of gray against the white slope, curling above the trees like a trail of breath. Not far now. Back at the cabin, Eli split wood with the calm repetition of someone trained by discipline and years. He worked in silence, stacking each log with care. The mare nickered behind him from the small stable. The forest creaked with wind. Then he saw it. A single boot print, too deep, not his. Another, near the fence. His hand went to the axe instinctively. He scanned the tree line. No birdsong, no squirrels. The kind of silence that used to mean ambushes during the war, the kind that crept in just before something shattered. Eli set the axe down and went inside. Clara was kneeling by the fire, stirring a pot of stew. She looked up, smiling slightly, a trace of contentment softening her features. He crossed the room in 2 strides. "Don't go outside," he said. She blinked. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He loaded the shotgun by the door, checked the revolver in his coat pocket, then moved to shutter the windows. "Is it wolves?" she asked, rising now, concern blooming. "Something worse," he murmured. Outside, the snow began to fall again, quiet and steady. Somewhere among the trees, Luther Cobb watched the cabin, eyes sharp, hand resting on the grip of his gun. Smiling, he had found her. Clara stood quietly in the doorway, watching Eli at the table. The firelight flickered across his face, casting shadows that made him look older, harder. His hands moved with slow precision, wiping down the long barrel of a rifle, oiling the chamber, then placing a single bullet on the cloth beside him. Another followed, then another. He was carving slivers from the base of each round, reshaping them with the edge of a small knife. She had never seen him touch a weapon before, not even when he hunted rabbits or cleared brush. He had always used traps, always quiet. Now, something was different. She stepped closer, hesitating. "You've done this before." He did not look up. Too many times. Her eyes lowered to the bullets. "Did you ever kill anyone?" The scraping paused. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he set the knife down and leaned back, staring at the fire. "I fought for the South," he said quietly. "Joined up when I was 17. Thought it was about pride, land, protecting what we had. That's what they told us." He let out a dry breath, not quite a laugh. "By the time I figured out what it was really about, I had blood on my hands. Boys, farmers, a man who was just trying to get home to his family." He looked at her now, his voice low. "I was good at it, too good. When the war ended, I couldn't go back to being someone's son. I didn't deserve to wear that name anymore, so I rode west, tried to disappear." Clara stepped forward, arms crossed over her chest, though not in defense, more like holding herself together. "Is that why you never carry a gun?" Eli nodded. "I swore never again, not unless someone's life depended on it." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "You're not the only one who lost who they were." He looked up at her, eyes softening. "I used to be a wife, a woman who read by candlelight, who sang when she cooked, who dreamed about planting roses by a front step." Her voice cracked. "Then I was just another body in a room full of locked doors. I stopped looking in mirrors. I forgot what I sounded like when I laughed." Tears slipped down her cheek. She wiped them away fast, angry at herself. "I didn't know who I was anymore until you brought me here." Silence wrapped around them, heavy but not cold. Eli looked at her for a long time, the lines around his mouth deepening. "If I could choose again," he said softly, "if I could ride into that town knowing what I know now." He stood, walked to her, and stopped just a breath away. "I would still pick you. I would still carry you out of there." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She didn't need them. Because in his voice, quiet, certain, she heard everything she had longed to believe, that she was not a burden, not a charity, not a mistake, that she was worth saving, that someone saw her, really saw her, and still chose her. And in that moment, with rifles oiled and bullets carved and snow falling steady outside, something unspoken passed between them. Not yet a kiss, not yet a promise, but the beginning of something real, something that, like them, had survived fire and ruin and come out breathing. The night was still, unnaturally so. Snow drifted gently against the cabin windows, the wind a low whisper through the trees. Inside, the fire had died down to glowing embers, casting a warm pulse across the wooden walls. Clara lay asleep, her breath slow and even beneath the heavy quilt. Her body had healed, but her spirit, still fragile, clung to this quiet as if it were the last good thing left in the world. She never heard the door creak. Luther Cobb moved like a shadow, silent, practiced. He eased through the entry, boots muffled by snow. The rifle slung over his shoulder remained unused. He preferred hands, rope, silence. Quieter that way, no mess. He found her easily. With a rough grip, he yanked the quilt away and grabbed her wrist before she could scream. His hand clamped over her mouth. "Shh, no noise, girl," he whispered, dragging her off the bed. Clara kicked, thrashed, tried to fight, but he was strong and she had not eaten much that day. He tied her wrists fast with a coarse rope, muttering under his breath, "You've caused quite a bit of trouble, sweetheart. They say you're worth $50. 50 just for breathing, imagine that." He bit down hard on his hand. He cursed and slapped her. Her head snapped sideways. Blood welled in her mouth. "You'll wish you hadn't done that." He hauled her toward the door. And then it opened. Eli stood there, snow on his coat, rifle already raised. His eyes locked on the scene. Clara bound, blood on her lip, terror in her eyes. "Let her go," Eli said, voice sharp and steady. Luther's grin curled under his mustache. "Well, hell, Didn't expect you back so soon. Thought you were just some lonesome fool. Guess I was wrong." Eli stepped inside, kicked the door shut behind him. The fire behind him roared brighter, as if answering something in him. "I said let her go." Luther didn't. Instead, he shoved Clara forward, hand at her throat. "You want her? Pay the price. Otherwise I take her back to Dead Rock, and no one ever sees her again." Eli lifted the gun. His hands shook. The weight of it, the feel of iron and death in his grip, it came back all at once. Mud and blood, screams in the trees, smoke rising over broken fields. The boy whose eyes stayed open after the bullet hit, the smell of burning flesh. His hands soaked in red. His breath caught. "Shoot him," Clara sobbed. "Please, Eli." But he couldn't move. Luther stepped sideways toward the door, dragging her with him. "You don't have it in you, Cowboy. I can see it. I've seen it before. You're soft now, rusted." Clara turned, her eyes blazing, her voice raw. "If you hadn't come for me that night, I'd be dead. You saved me, Eli, not because you had to, because you chose to. And now I'm choosing too." She stared straight at him, through the shaking hands, through the ghosts that clung to his skin. "I choose you." And in that moment, everything stilled. Eli exhaled. The rifle cracked. Luther stumbled back, eyes wide. A red bloom spread across his chest. He dropped to his knees, then fell with a dull thud, face first into the snow, tracked across the floor. Clara collapsed to her knees, gasping, sobbing. Eli didn't move. The gun dropped from his hands. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, shaking violently. The cabin spun. The old horrors rushed up like a wave, faces, screams, the smell of blood. And he could not breathe. Clara crawled to him, her hands still bound, and pressed her forehead to his. "It's over," she whispered. "He's gone. You saved me." But Eli didn't speak. His hands trembled. His eyes stared at the fire, unseeing. And in the red porn glow of the hearth, fire and blood mixed again, only this time it was not war that came from the shot, but something closer to redemption. If only he could see it yet. The snow melted slowly, reluctant to loosen its grip on the mountain, but by the end of March the first shoots of green crept through the frost-hardened soil, curling like timid whispers of life. Spring had come. The cabin changed with the season. Eli repaired the porch, straightened the sagging beam, and replaced the broken shutters. Clara opened the windows each morning, letting in the light. She planted wildflowers beside the doorstep, daisy, sage, and something yellow she did not know the name of but liked because it reminded her of warmth. The air smelled of thawing pine and new earth. Eli spoke less, but something about his silence had softened. It was no longer a silence of fear or guilt. It was the kind that let her rest against his shoulder without asking. That filled the room, even when they said nothing. That made her feel safe. He still woke sometimes in the night, sweat on his brow, breath shallow, but now he let her hold his hand until it passed. He was learning, and so was she. One afternoon, Clara sat at the table with a piece of parchment, writing a letter not meant for anyone else's eyes. A letter to the girl she used to be. "I thought no one would ever look at me again without shame. I thought I had nothing left to give. But I was wrong. There is a man who saw me, not for what I had lost, but for what I still carried. He gave me shelter when I was cold, food when I was starving, but more than that, he gave me back myself." Some hearts don't come perfect. Some come bruised and cracked, like doors left open too long. But the ones that stay, those are the ones that matter. You are not unworthy. You are not ruined. Not when someone is willing to carry your broken pieces and still call them beautiful. She folded the letter and placed it under the loose board near her bed, just to know it was there. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the hills in amber and rose, Clara and Eli sat on the steps of the cabin. She reached over and took his hand. "You never ask me what I want now," she said. He looked at her, eyebrows lifted slightly. "I want to stay," she said, "not because I owe you, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is the only place I've ever felt like I wasn't just surviving." He squeezed her hand but said nothing. She turned toward him fully then, reached out, and placed her hand flat against his chest. "You feel that?" she asked. He nodded. "It still beats," she whispered. "Even after everything, even after war and blood and ghosts, it still beats. And now, it beats for me." Something in his eyes broke open then, something he had been holding shut for years. Not pain, not fear, but the slow, quiet truth of healing. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against hers. In that moment, the world was still. Weeks later, when the wild mustard bloomed golden across the field beyond the ridge, Eli took Clara's hand again, but this time he placed something in it. He rang. Simple, forged from a coin he had melted and shaped himself. It bore no jewels, but it shone in her palm like firelight. They said their vows alone, with only the wind and the birds and the field to witness. "I who once believed I was beyond forgiveness," Eli said, "choose you, not because you needed saving, but because you saved me." Clara, tears in her eyes, whispered back, "I do. I choose this life, with all its scars, with all its mornings, with you." They kissed, soft, long, Then he pulled her close, arms around her like the walls of the cabin they had built together. And for the first time in either of their lives, they felt whole. Not perfect, but whole. And the wind, for once, did not howl, it hummed. In a land where guns spoke louder than hearts, and pasts weighed heavier than snow, one man laid down his weapon, and picked up love, and one woman, left for nothing, found that even a broken soul could still bloom in the right hands. This was not a story of rescue. It was a story of redemption. If this journey moved you, if it reminded you that love can rise even from the coldest winters of the soul, then please like, share, and subscribe to where we tell the tales of forgotten hearts, defiant hope, and love that outlives dust, distance, and danger. Subscribe now and saddle up for the next ride.